why your personal brand is going to be the single most important investment that you make this year. We talk a lot on this podcast about the tactical things you can do that are going to help you get ahead in your career, or that are going to help you optimize your life, or that are going to help you live with more balance. And I can confidently say there is literally nothing you can do in your career that will be more important than establishing a strong personal brand. Nothing. Flat out. And maybe building a network. No, I'm going to go with brand. I'm going to stick with brand. I'm sticking with my initial perspective. Okay, you guys? Because your personal brand enters a room way before you do, and it leaves way after you're gone. Your personal brand is essentially your professional reputation personified.
Corporate life is a game, but no one hands you the rule book. Here on Secrets of the Career Game, we break down the unspoken norms and behind-the-scenes dynamics shaping your career today. I'm Kendall Berg, that career coach, and I guide professionals to grow, advance, and lead with clarity. Each week, we explore the tools, habits, and conversations that build confidence, presence, and long-term momentum.
Well, I think personal brands have been getting a lot of hype lately. Like, oh, I'm going to start a personal brand on LinkedIn. I'm going to start a personal brand on Instagram. And it's become almost synonymous with, are you an influencer? Okay. And there's nothing wrong with that as somebody who does it. But when I talk about your personal brand, what I really mean is, how are you perceived across your organization by leaders, by coworkers, by stakeholders? And how does that translate into the opportunities that are presented to you? So we're going to start with kind of why your personal brand matters, what it is, how it's used, those types of things. Because I feel like personal brand has become too, popular, and we don't really dive into the heart of what it is. So your personal brand is if somebody is asked about you when you are not in the room, and they say, what do we think about Kendall? It's how they answer that question. And I bet when you hear that, you think, well, I want them to answer like this. I want them to answer that she's driven, she's hardworking, she delivers great results, she's a great team member, she's collaborative. Like, we want them to say all these things. And because a personal brand can be so broad as to just say, I want it to be positive, I want them to say positive things about me, we don't hone in on what our personal brand actually is. And your personal brand is what makes you unique and different from every other person in your role. Now, you may be thinking, like, I'm special, I'm the only person in my role. No, you're not. Okay. There are 50 different senior managers in your organization, or there are 30 different directors, or there are 50 different people in technology, right? Pick a facet of your role, and there will always be people to compare you to. Always. And what leadership wants to know is what makes Kendall uniquely different from them? What makes Kendall special in a project or in an initiative that I can't get somebody else to easily replicate? Now, if you've been following along for a while, I talk about my personal brand a lot. My personal brand is, I am the person that you put in a black hole who brings organization to chaos. I do this by building the next generation of great leaders and repeatable, scalable processes for my organization. Now, obviously, I've said this a million times. This is my established personal brand. But the facets of it that are important, that are differentiating for Kendall, is that I don't need structure to operate with structure. I can be thrown into a part of the business where nobody knows what's going on, nobody understands how it works, there's total lack of clarity on what's supposed to be happening, and I can still build and deliver something that is successful. That is my special, unique skill. Now, I've done this in a lot of different spaces. I've done it in tech, I've done it in operations, I've done it in marketing, I've done it in audit, I've done it in finance. It doesn't matter the vertical or the industry. What I do well is I bring organization to a chaotic space. Now, the reason your personal brand matters is because this is how people talk about you when you're not around. Now, that could be in the interview process for a new job. Why would we pick Kendall over Joe Schmo? Well, because I can put her in this totally chaotic area that we have that we can't figure out what to do, and she's going to figure it out. Or it's what people talk about when they're thinking of putting you on a project. Like, hey, there's this great new opportunity. It's got lots of senior leadership visibility. Should we put Kendall on it? Well, it's kind of chaotic. If Kendall doesn't have the skill to bring organization to that, she's not the right fit. And so your brand determines your opportunities, either in the job search or in your role. And so it's really important that you understand what your personal brand is and that you build one with intentionality. And we're going to talk about how to do that in a bit. But when you think about what your brand is and your unique special sauce, you also need to look for jobs and opportunities that need that skill. So you're building a personal brand. You've decided, Kendall, you're right. It is really important and I should have one. Great. Thank you for tuning in today. And you're thinking, okay, I don't know what my special secret sauce is. We're going to talk about that in a minute. But once you know it, what you need to do is ensure you're in an organization that values it. Now, I have been a high performer for a majority of my corporate career, but there have been roles where I was considered an underperformer. There have been roles where my special skill was not needed because either the organization was already organized, and so bringing organization didn't add any value, or they wanted organization, but they didn't want it from me. And so it's really important once you figure out what is your unique skill set that you're seeking out roles and companies where that skill set is in need by the other party. Otherwise, it doesn't matter how great you are at your special skill if nobody needs it. If a tree falls in the forest and no one is around to hear it, does your special skill matter? Okay. So how do you figure out what your special skill is? So some of this is going to require some pattern recognition. So I really recommend in the early stages of trying to figure out what your unique skill is taking a lot of notes. This is getting 360 feedback from other people. What do they think you're good at, right? Because usually your personal brand, maybe not in its full form, but somewhat exists in how people already perceive you. So how do we get some 360 feedback? How do we take notes every time we're on a project and something goes well? Or we get a shout out, or we get a, congratulatory email, or we get a bonus, or we get an award. What were the things we were doing? What was the project we were doing? And what did we add to that project specifically? Once you start to see this pattern recognition, you'll be able to see, oh, here's the common thread. Now, if you're wanting to skip ahead and you're like, I don't want to take notes for 6 months, then your special skill is going to come in terms of how you want to be known at work. Most people that I talk to want to be known a specific way. They want to be known as a great collaborator, or as somebody who really delivers strategic results, or as somebody who is really plugged in with the core customer. Think about how you want to be known. And a lot of the time, your unique value is going to come out in that naturally, because most people have some level of self-awareness. And we're not saying, oh, I want to be known as a strategic thinker, and yet we hate strategic thinking. So you want to figure out what your secret sauce is. Then you want to make sure you're in a role that needs it, or a company that needs it. Once those two things are in place, then we're going to leverage your personal brand when it comes to building relationships. So I said at the start of the episode, there is nothing that is more important than building and investing in your personal brand, because your personal brand then feeds into relationship building and networking. If I'm building a bunch of relationships with people, but I don't know my brand, I don't know how I want to show up at work, I don't know how to talk about myself and my achievements, then I'm not going to build super successful relationships. I might build casual relationships. I might know them, their favorite sports teams, their kids' names, but I'm not going to build one that's strategic. Now, quick side note, everybody always gets on me when I say this on an episode. I want you to build strategic relationships. And everybody goes, ew, you're using people and it's fake. It's not fake. You still authentically care about people. You're still building genuine connection. But you're doing it in a way that is thoughtful and intentional and strategic for your career. And that is okay to do both. That doesn't mean you ignore somebody because they're not valuable to you in your career journey. It just means that we're prioritizing time with people who do hold influence. Okay, whole separate episode, but quick caveat. There was a company that I joined a few years ago, and I've told this story before, but I think it's really important. Shortly after I joined, they were preparing for performance reviews. And what they did is they sent a list of everybody who was at my seniority level to all of the executive team. And each executive had like their own column. And it said, great, if you know the person, make your box green. If you kind of know them, make it yellow. If you don't know them at all, make it red. And go down the list of everybody at this seniority level and tell us how well you know them. And this was sent to, I want to say 12 different executives. And on that list, there were 2 people my seniority level who were green across the board. Me and one other person. Now, I had only been there, I want to say 4 months when this exercise was run. Okay, I haven't been there very long. So what are all other 50 people on this list doing if the leadership team does not know who they are? They're not building strategic relationships. They're not getting visibility for their efforts, right? It's the same amount of work that I do as somebody else who's my counterpart. But if nobody knows they're doing that work, it's not helping them. This is where the strategy comes into your career. And the reason that I bring this up is my RAG status report was so high for somebody who'd been there such a short time because I was so honed in on what my personal brand was. I knew exactly what I was good at. I knew exactly why it was unique and valuable. And I went out of my way to intentionally connect with the different people who could find value in that skill set to ensure that they knew me and to ensure I was helping them and that I was adding value to them early on in that role. And that role ended up being a great growth opportunity for me, and I ended up meeting a lot of really awesome people. But I bring this up because it all comes back to that personal brand. Once you know what your personal brand is, you have to go out and you have to meet people and you have to teach them what your personal brand is. They're not going to just know. So this gets into the tactical of how do we use your personal brand. So your personal brand gets used 3 ways. First way, when you're in an interview and somebody goes, "Tell me about yourself." Everybody gives like a villain origin story. When I was a child, I got my first toy cell phone and it made me really passionate about cell phones. So I went into marketing and that's how I ended up at Apple, making marketing for cell phones. Right? We give like this weird backstory about who we were as a kid and how it's translated to our adulthood. What I like you to do instead is lead with your personal brand. And then the same way that a resume works, you're going to show how you've solidified that personal brand working backwards in your experience. So what that could sound like is, thank you so much for asking. I'm really the person who brings organization to chaos. I do this by building the next generation of great leaders and repeatable, scalable processes for the organization. Most recently, I've been doing this as a director of strategy, where I was responsible for delivering XYZ initiative, and I oversaw a team of over 17 people. We were able to optimize our efficiency and decrease our workload by 30% in order to take on additional scope that benefited the company. Prior to that, I was a vice president of chief data, blah, 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 whatever it is. Okay. So when you give an answer like that, it's highlighting, hey, here's my skill that you need. Here's an example of how I've done that skill. And then here's another one. And then I always say, if you'd like me to go further back in my experience, I'm more than happy to do so. That's plenty. If they want you to go further back, they will ask. Unless they're looking for very niche experience that you did 20 years ago, odds are they're not going to ask you to go back any further. But that sets you up for success with a really solid answer. Then going back to having brand and company need alignment, if the company needs your skill, now they're really interested in you. And if the company doesn't need your special skill, they have a lot less interest in you as a candidate. And that's okay. You don't want to work there anyways. The second way that we use your personal brand is we're going to create kind of a mini version, a snapshot, if you will, that you use to answer the question, what do you do? Because when you meet people across your company, they're going to go, "Oh, Kendall, what do you do for the company?" Or when you meet people outside of your company that you're just socializing with, they're going to go, "Oh, what do you do?" And 99% of people go, "I'm the director of strategy." Right? We lead with our title. We don't lead with who we are. We don't lead with the value that we bring. So instead, you want to kind of create a mini version and you want to pair that with your title. So if somebody comes up to me and says, "Kendall, what do you do?" I say, "Oh, I work in the black hole and I bring a little bit of organization to the chaos." Right now I'm doing that as a director of strategy. That tells them way more about me than I'm a director of strategy. So we're going to use that mini version. And then the third way that we're going to use your brand is you're going to pick out 2 to 3 key phrases in your brand that really resonate with you. That if you were not in the room and somebody said those 3 things about you, you'd be like, "Oh, that's so nice of them. It's exactly how I want to be known." Those 3 phrases, you're going to learn to weave into work when you talk about what you do. So one of my phrases is black hole, because I bring organization to chaos, right? And if my boss comes to me and says, "Hey, I need you to do XYZ, I'm going to say, "Great. Another black hole for me to fix. What do you need?" Use that language consistently, because when you're not in the room, which we're going to talk about in a second and how performance reviews work, and somebody goes, "What do we think about Kendall?" And somebody goes, "Oh, I feel like you could just put her in a black hole and she does great." We want everybody in that room to nod and go, "Yes, yes, that's exactly what I was going to say. It's exactly what I was going to say." That is the value, is you're building consistency. And your brand is going to impact your performance review. So the way that a performance review traditionally works is Your boss is going to give you a score 1 through 5, 1 through 3, whatever your company does. And so is everybody else's boss. And then they're going to host what's called a cross calibration. And they're going to bring all the leaders of a certain seniority level together. And they're going to talk about the ratings in their organization. And they're going to say, oh, I gave so-and-so a 5 because of this. And somebody's going to go, well, I don't think they deserve a 5. They didn't really run that project. That project was run by so-and-so. Maybe they should be a 4. And they debate. And the goal is that that exercise would put everyone on even footing. And this is important for you if you're listening because, one, your boss does not determine your rating by themselves. They then have to defend that rating in a group of their peers, which means if everybody else loves you and your boss doesn't, you can still get a high rating. Very important when you're working with a toxic manager. The second thing it means is if you don't have a pervasive personal brand that everybody knows, what's going to end up happening is in that room, they're going to want to talk about you, but they may all say different things. Oh, well, Kendall's really helpful. Oh, Kendall's really nice. Yeah, Kendall seems great. But they can't come to a cohesive brand for you. And when that happens, it's much higher to get a really high rating or to get a promotion because there's no consistency in how you're perceived across the org. If you're looking to get promoted or progress, you want cohesion. You want that entire environment to think, oh my gosh, Kendall's amazing. She's great at this one thing. We need her in leadership, right? And a lot of people, I think, like to put their heads in the sand a little bit because they want to think like, oh, well, if I'm just really good at my job, my boss will go into that cross calibration and they will defend me. They'll bring examples of my work and everyone will know that work's super important. And it won't matter if I didn't talk to anybody. And it won't matter if I don't have a personal brand. And it won't matter if I didn't build a bunch of relationships because everybody's going to see in that meeting that like I did a bunch of really hard work. And that's not how it goes. I have seen people who did a lot of really hard work go into a cross calibration and their boss has them listed as, let's say, a 5 out of 5. And they're like, oh, this person's amazing. They get and exceeds expectations. They've done so well this year. And then we all start to talk and somebody goes, well, but aren't they really difficult to work with? Didn't they argue with so-and-so in this one meeting? And somebody else goes, yeah. And I don't feel like it's really clear what value they would bring at the next level. Like, yeah, they're good at their job. They did a bunch of technical work, but they're not really a leader for the company. And it starts to bring them down towards a 4 or a 3. And I see it all the time. And what's so hard in those rooms is if you're not the boss, you like want to go to this person and be like, dude, you're so good at your job. Would you just do the other parts of your job that we need you to do so that we can give you a really high rating? Please, please. But they don't want to hear that. And it's not your place because you're not their manager. But I've seen this happen time and time again where somebody is technically amazing, technically proficient, but they get held back and they don't get the progress that they want because they're not investing in their personal brand and their network. And the second way that your brand impacts your performance review or your end progression is the 9 box. So if you're not familiar with the 9 box, it looks like this. And the 9 box is a plot of your performance and your potential. And so if you think about performance being on the x-axis, right, the higher the number gets, the better your performance is. So if you're doing really well technically in your job, you would be on the high end of your performance indicator. And then potential is the vertical. And potential basically speaks to how high does leadership think you may get one day. And this is about soft skills. This is about how you communicate. This is about how you run a meeting. This is about how you tell a story. This is about your personal brand. And if your personal brand is strong, if your communication is strong, your potential is much higher. Because now they go, okay, well, Kendall could be put in a black hole and she'd be successful and she's building this next generation of leaders. She builds these great processes. She could run an operation shop. She could be a COO. She could lead a larger team. And that makes your potential higher. And if you don't have a strong brand, if you don't have good communication skills, you may be super high on performance and very low in potential. And that means leadership wants to keep you in your current role. Because in your current role, you're killing it. Your execution is high. You're doing everything that you're supposed to do. The work is great, but they don't see the potential for you to move up. They don't see the potential for you to become a leader or to step into leadership. And that is the problem. The problem is if you're not seen as potential, if you're not seen with your personal brand, it doesn't matter how good you are. They will not put you at the top of that 9 box. And the top 3 boxes in a 9 box are considered the best place to be, right? So this is like your high performers, high potential, your medium performers, high potential, and your high performers, medium potential. Those 3 are like the best boxes theoretically to be in. And your boss will never tell you which box you're in, or they're not supposed to. But that's where you want to be. And what happens so often is I see people fall in high performance, low potential. And that's the workhorse. That's the individual who shows up to work, they do their job, they're technically great, they have no personal brand, no leadership, no communication skills, and they get stuck there and they hate it. So this is why your personal brand is going to be the most impactful investment that you make this year. It's going to be the best thing that you do for yourself in your career. So you're going to have this personal brand. You're going to know how to use it in interviews, in what do you do for a living, and when you describe your work. You're going to invest in building relationships strategically with leaders who are going to be in your cross calibration using that personal brand. But say you still don't get promoted because now you've already been at the company 6 years, you're starting to invest in your brand, but it's been a long time and it's taking more time to get them to see you as this new leader, right? Rebrands take effort and they take time, right? So I tell most of my clients your average rebrand is going to take a minimum of 6 months, minimum. And that's if you kill it and there's an appetite to see you change, okay? And maximum of 18. Rebrand takes time. If you don't want to wait for that time and you've got your personal brand and you're like, cool, I'm going to go on the job market. I'm going to find something at the next level that's better for me at a good company with this personal brand that I now have in my back pocket. Here's what you're going to do. You're going to start with what you're uniquely good at. You're going to figure out what the company needs to need for your skill to be valuable. So if you're good at organization, they need chaos. If you are good at leading people, they're going to have a need to improve the culture. If you are good at driving for results, you need a company that has no results and really wants them, right? Find a company in need of the skill that you bring. Those are the companies you're going to target. Now, you may apply to something on LinkedIn that seems like a really great role. It's a good fit for your skills. It seems really interesting. And you don't know if the company needs what you have. That is the purpose of the interview. Yes, they are checking to see if they want to hire you, but you are also checking to see if you want to work for them. Ask questions. Get to figure out, what is their culture like? Don't just ask, what is your culture like? Just as a side note, that's a terrible question. Hey, I'm really interested in mentorship. Does your company support that? And what does that program look like? Hey, I really value the opportunity to measure my capacity effectively. How does your team determine highest priorities and deprioritize work that's not driving the business forward? Ask real questions. Okay. Totally separate episode, but my 2 cents. Okay. And part of those questions are going to be, does your company need my skill? Maybe not that flat out, but figure out what your skill is. So for me, I'm going to say, hey, where would organization add the most value in your team? What kind of things do you feel the team struggles with that's like the pebble in your shoe causing problems that need to be resolved? Those types of questions are going to get me closer to understanding, do they need somebody with an organizational capability? All right. And then once you know that the company does need your skill and they're a good fit, then you sell that as your primary capability. Yes, you can do all the technical stuff. But I tell my clients all the time, if you're interviewing for a good job, everybody who's interviewing can do the technical stuff, especially if you want to work at a golden ticket company, right? The Amazon, Google, Uber, Nike, Disney, Universal companies of the world, the Deloitte, the McKinseys. Everybody you're interviewing against has your same technical skill set or better. That's not going to be what sets you apart. What's going to be what sets you apart is, but I can do that and I can learn things really quickly and apply them. I can build relationships that are really authentic and really deep. I can collaborate effectively with multiple groups, right? When I was up and coming in my career, the way that I always pitched myself in interviews is I'm a translator. I can say different things to 5 different people and they will all hear the same thing. That makes me incredibly impactful at work. Figure out what it is and sell it in that interview. So hopefully you guys found this episode helpful. If you did, make sure that you are subscribed and that you leave us 5 stars. If you have any question about your personal brand, go ahead and leave it in the comments below. Otherwise, let's get started for a really great year and invest in that personal brand that's going to make all the difference in your performance.